Letter 10. I had not intended saying anything about the kitchen garden, as it hardly comes within a lady's province. But, as you tell me you are so much annoyed by your old gardener never having the things you want, when you want them, that you think of farming a small kitchen garden near the house, I shall be very happy to give you my advice as to what appears to me to be the best method of dome. So, every kitchen garden ought, if possible, to be either square or oblong, for the convenience of planting the beds, and you will find a garden of 1 acre in extent, quite as much as you will be able to manage. I would advise you to have it surrounded by a wall, about 10 feet high for fruit trees, and in front of this wall, there should be a border 10 or 12 feet wide. Beyond which, should be a gravel walk, 4 feet wide, leaving a square or oblong plot of ground in the center for culinary vegetables. This central plot may either have a main walk up the center, and 2 or 3 side walks, or be left all in one bed, which may be divided into compartments, with paths between, to suit the convenience of the gardener. The best situation for your kitchen garden will be as near the stable as possible, for the convenience of manure, and, of course, it will join the reserve ground. The surface of the ground should be level, or gently sloping to the south, and there should be no high trees near it. The whole of the garden should be well drained, and you should contrive it so as to have easy access to either pond or river water. A valley or a hill is a bad situation for a kitchen garden, as the valley is very liable to injury from frost, on account of the damps that hang over it, and the hill is not only cold, but exposed to injury from high winds. I have already mentioned that the form of a kitchen garden should be either square or oblong, and I may add that the walks should always be straight, as, if they were serpentine, it would be difficult to wheel a barrow of manure along them without overturning it. The square form of the garden, however, is not only on account of the walks, but, in order that the compartment in the center may be divided into oblong beds, as it is most convenient to sow vegetables in straight lines, to allow of weeding and hoeing between them, earthing them up, etc. The best soil for a kitchen garden is a sandy loam, and the surface soil should be from 2 to 3 feet deep. You will find it very convenient to have a small vinery or forcing house close to the kitchen garden, and you can have a small garden for melon and cucumber beds, called a melon ground. Or, this may form a part of your reserve ground. The first thing to be done, when you have fixed upon your ground, is to form the walks, marking them out by 2 garden lines, and then digging out the space between, in the shape of an inverted arch, which should be from 1 to 2 feet deep in the center. The arch is then partly filled in with brickbats, stones, or any other hard rubbish which can be procured, leaving a little hollow space exactly in the center to serve as a drain. Care must be taken, when filling in the rubbish, to put the largest pieces in first, then pieces somewhat smaller, and then pieces broken very small, which are rammed down as hard as possible, so as to make a smooth surface immediately under the gravel. The gravel before laying it down should be sifted, and all pieces larger than a moderate-sized gooseberry should be thrown on one side. As soon as the small gravel is laid down and evenly spread, it should be rolled, and this rolling should be repeated occasionally, till the walk becomes quite hard and firm. If the gravel does not bind well, it may be improved by mixing with it powdered burnt clay, in the proportion of 1 wheelbarrow full of clay to a 2-horse cart load of gravel. The clay may be burnt by making it into a heap, intermixed with, and surrounded by, faggot wood. Gravel walks should always be slightly raised in the middle, in order that the water may run off on each side. If you should have an old gravel walk that wants renovating, the gravel should be loosened with a pick, turned over, raked, and firmly rolled, adding a coating of fresh gravel if necessary. If weeds should appear on a gravel walk, they are best killed by watering them with salt and water, and this liquid will prevent any other weeds from appearing. Box edgings are the best for gravel walks, and March or April is a good season for planting them. The following is the mode of performing this operation, which requires some attention, as the beauty of the edging depends on its regularity. The margin of the bed, for about 1 foot in breadth, should be watered, and afterwards beaten firm and level with the back of a spade, A garden line should then be stretched along close to the walk, and a shallow trench opened, sloping towards it, at an angle of rather less than 45 degrees. Some dwarf box having been procured from the nurseryman, it should be divided into separate plants, and the branches and roots trimmed, so that the plants may be nearly of a size. These are laid along the sloping face, as regularly as possible, with their tops rising about an inch above the soil, and the earth is drawn upon them, so as to fill up the trench, and make them quite firm. The plants are then watered, and nothing further is required, but to supply the place of any that may chance to die, and to keep the tips trimmed neatly. The crops of culinary vegetables are of two kinds, those that are permanent, and those that are temporary. Of the permanent crops, the most important are the asparagus beds, on account of the great length of time they take in preparing. The ground must be first trenched 3 or 4 feet deep, and plenty of stable dung buried at the bottom of the trench. The beds are then marked out 4 feet wide, and paths left between them, and the plants, which must be procured from a nurseryman, as they should be 2 years old when they are first put into the bed, must be planted in rows 9 inches apart, and deep enough to have the crown of the root 2 inches below the surface of the ground. The beds are covered with rotten manure during winter, which is forked into the ground in the spring. The asparagus stalks are not cut till the 2nd or 3rd year after planting, but after that the beds continue to produce for 12 or 14 years, or even more. All the shoots that push up from April to midsummer may be cut off and used for the table, but those that spring after midsummer should be suffered to expand their leaves, in order that they may elaborate their sap, and thus strengthen the roots. Sea kale is planted in beds in the same manner as asparagus, when the plants are a year old. The first year the plants will require little care, except cutting down their flower stems whenever they appear, but the 2nd year, each plant must be covered with river sand, and then have a sea kale pot turned over it, on which must be heaped stable dung 15 or 20 inches high, in order that the heat may make the young shoots grow rapidly, and thus make them tender and succulent. Artichokes, tart rhubarb, and horseradish are other permanent crops found in kitchen gardens, but they do not require any particular care in their culture. The temporary crops in kitchen gardens require a constant change, as it is found from experience that the same crop cannot be grown on the same ground for 2 years in succession, without becoming of an inferior quality. And thus, it is found necessary to fix what is called the rotation of crops, and to arrange that in each compartment a fresh crop shall be grown every year, as different as possible from the one that grew in it the year before. Thus, onions may be succeeded by lettuces, carrots by peas, potatoes by cabbages, and turnips by spinach. The cabbage tribe is very much improved by cultivation, but the plants contained in it require a great deal of manure and frequent watering to make them succulent and good. Brussels sprouts are a variety of the Savoy cabbage, and, as they are said to be very inferior in quality, if raised from seed ripened in Britain, you must inquire if the seed you purchase has been procured from abroad. Broccoli and cauliflowers, particularly the latter, require too much care in their culture for me to advise you to have anything to do with them. Peas and beans should be grown in an open sunny situation, and in a soil that is tolerably rich, but not freshly manured. Some persons sow their early peas in November and December, but very little is gained by so doing, and, if the winter should be severe, the crop is sometimes lost. The best time, therefore, for sowing early peas is in February, and the late ones in 2 or 3 sowings from April to July. Beans are sown at the same time as peas, but they should be grown in stronger soil. They do not require sticks, and they are generally topped, that is, the upper part of the leading shoot of each plant is cut off. An operation that would be fatal to peas. Kidney beans are of 2 quite distinct kinds. The dwarf kidney beans are annuals, which should be sown in drills, about 2 feet apart, the 1st or 2nd week in May, but the scarlet runners are perennials, and the seed should be sown 2 or 3 inches asunder, and very lightly covered, and the rows should at least be 3 feet apart. The plants will require sticks like peas. Potatoes are propagated by what are called sets, that is, pieces into which the tuber is cut, each of which contains a bud or eye. Before they are planted, the ground should be trenched, and rotten dung dug into it. The early potatoes are planted in March, and the late ones in May or June. When the potatoes are to be planted, a garden line is stretched across the beds, and holes are made along it with a dibber, about 6 inches deep, and 9 inches, or a foot apart. The sets are then put into the ground, one in each hole, with the eye upwards, and the earth firmly pressed down on them. When the plants come up, they are frequently hoed and earthed up, and as soon as they come into blossom, some cultivators cut off the tops, to prevent the formation of the seed. The Jerusalem artichoke is propagated by sets, like the potato, and the turnip, the carrot, and the parsnip, are propagated by seeds sown in drills about March. Red beet is cultivated in the same manner, and plants that are sown in March will have roots ready for the table in September or October. Great care, however, must be used, while taking them out of the ground, not to wound the outer skin, and in the kitchen they must be only washed and not scraped, as, if the outer skin should be removed, all the coloring matter will escape when the root is boiled, and the root, instead of its being of its usual bright red, will be of a dingy whitish pink. Radishes are sown at different seasons, generally every fortnight, from January to July or August. Spinach is of two kinds, the round-leaved variety, which is generally sown for the summer crop in January or February, and the roots of which may be pulled up and thrown away as soon as the leaves are gathered, and the Flanders spinach, which has triangular leaves, and which is sown for the winter crop in August. This last kind should have only the outer leaves pinched or cut off, and, thus treated, it will continue producing fresh leaves all the winter, as it is quite hardy, and not injured by frost. The seeds of this plant will keep good 4 years. I do not suppose you will attempt to grow onions, as they will require a great deal of care, but you can sow a few in March for salads. If you wish to grow onions of an enormous size, you should raise the seed on a hotbed in February, and transplant them into the open ground, in April or May. The soil into which they are transplanted should be very rich, and mixed with charcoal roughly powdered. The onions should be planted a foot apart very way, only the fibrous roots being buried in the soil, and they should be watered regularly every day. All the onion tribe require a very rich soil, which is very much improved for them, by mixing charcoal with it. Lettuces are of two kinds, the cabbage lettuces, which may be sown broadcast at any time from February to August, and require no after-care, except thinning out and watering, and cos lettuces, which are generally blanched by bending the tips of the leaves over the heart, and tying them in that position, with a bit of bast mat. Endive and succory are blanched in the same manner, and mustard and cress only require sowing, as they are cut for salads while in their seed leaves. Celery requires a good deal of care in its culture. The seed must be sown in March or April, in a bed the soil of which is formed of equal parts of loam and rotten dung. When the young plants come up, they are transplanted into another bed of very rich soil, and when they are about a foot high, they are removed into trenches for blanching. These trenches are made 4 feet apart, 18 inches wide, and 12 inches deep, and they are filled 9 inches high, with a rich compost of strong fresh soil and rotten dung. The plants are taken up with as much earth as will adhere to their roots, and, their side shoots having been removed, they are set in the center of the trench 9 or 10 inches apart. As they grow, the earth is drawn up to them, a little at a time, taking care never to let the earth rise above the heart of the plant, and this earthing up is repeated 5 or 6 times, at intervals of about 10 days or a fortnight, till the plants are ready for use. The pot herbs, as they are continually wanted in cookery, are much better in a garden near the kitchen. One of the most important is parsley, which is generally sown in a drill, in February or March, and the plants of which do not seed till the 2nd year. Fennel is a perennial, which, when once introduced, requires no further care. Thyme, sage, pot marjoram, and winter savory are all dwarf shrubs, which require no care after they have been once planted. Mint, winter marjoram, and the common marjoram are perennials, but the sweet or knotted marjoram, summer savory, and basil require sowing every year like parsley. I would not advise you to grow cucumbers or melons, but, should you feel inclined to try your skill, you have only to have a hotbed made like that, for raising flower seeds, but with a 2 or 3 light frame, remembering that it will take a cartload of stable dung for every light. The plants are raised in pots, and, when they are about 5 weeks old, they are planted 3 together in little ridges of earth, made under each light. When the plants have produced 2 rough leaves, the ends of the shoots are generally pinched off, and this is called stopping the runners. When the plants come into flower, the pollen of the male flowers should be conveyed to the female ones, as otherwise the fruit very often drops off as soon as it is set. Seeds for the first crop of cucumbers are sown in December or January, but the principal crop is sown in March. The great difficulty is to grow the cucumbers long and straight, and to keep them green, and with a beautiful bloom. For the first purpose, a brick may be placed under the fruit, and for the second, abundance of leaves should be left on the plant, and the ground in which it grows should be kept quite moist, as it is found that the plant succeeds best when it has abundance of heat and moisture, and has grown in the shade. Melons require the same treatment as cucumbers, with the exception of their beds being about 10 degrees hotter, as, for example, the seed bed should not be less than 65 degrees, and the fruiting bed should not be less than 75 degrees. Gourds and tomatoes should be sown in a hotbed in March, and planted out in May, the latter against a wall. Mushrooms are generally grown in the backslide of a vinery, or forcing house, in beds made of fresh horse dung, which has lain in a heap under cover, and been turned over several times for about a fortnight or 3 weeks, till every part has thoroughly fermented. A bed is then marked out about 12 or 14 feet long, and 5 feet broad, and, if it is on the earth, a pit is made of that size, by taking out the soil about 6 inches deep. The bottom of the bed should be formed by a layer of long fresh stable manure about 4 inches thick. On this, several other layers must be placed of the prepared dung, each being beaten flat with the fork, so as to make the bed as close and compact as possible, till it is about 5 feet high, when the top should be finished off like the ridge of a house. In this state the bed should remain about a fortnight, and then some bricks of mushroom spawn, having been procured from a nurseryman, they should be broken into pieces about 1 inch or 1.5 inches square, and strewed regularly over the bed, each piece of the spawn being buried, by raising up a little of the duma and inserting it. After this, the surface of the bed must be beaten flat with the spade, and the whole covered with a loamy soil, and beaten quite smooth. The bed is then covered about 1 foot thick with oat straw, and again with mats, and it will require no further care for a month or 6 weeks, by which time the mushrooms will be ready for the table. Care should be taken in gathering them, to twist them up by the roots, as, if they are cut off, the root, which is left in the ground, will decay, and be injurious to the young plants. Mushrooms may be made to grow in lawns, by procuring some bricks of mushroom spawn, and, after breaking them into pieces about 1 inch or 2 inches square, burying these pieces by raising a little of the turf wherever the mushrooms are wished to grow, and placing the spawn under it. This should be done in April or May, and, if the lawn be afterwards rolled, no other care will be requisite until September, when the mushrooms will be ready for gathering.